similar coding challenge to the one we have last time. If you have been following along, the one we had last time, just to go back over it, it was a function that took in a string and returned how many times a letter that was taken in appear in the string. So if the function took in the word JavaScript and we're asking how many times a appears in JavaScript, it returned 2. It is really similar to the one we have today. And the one we have today, it says write a function that takes in a string, this should be string right here, and returns the maximum character in that string. So if it takes in Ivy, for example, it should return Y because the maximum character in Ivy is Y. We have 3 Ys. If it takes in JavaScript, it should return A because JavaScript, the maximum character in it is 2 A's. So that is the function, and we'll practically start it off very similar to the way we did the mass occurrence one last time. But first, let's just write out a pseudocode of how we can approach this problem and how we can solve it, right? So we're going to call it mass character. You can call it anything you want, and this takes in a string, so let's just do it like that. You can also just write strings. I usually just write it like that. All right, so what do we want to do with the string first? Just like we did for max occurrence, at first we'll probably want to split the string into individual letters, right? And then go through it and count those letters. So let's just go ahead and write it out. Split string into letters. And the second thing is, once we have those individual letters, we'll need a way to keep count of each of those letters. So we'll want to loop through the string and count the letters, right? Count each individual letter. And after we do that, again, these are really vague, but it works in our case. After that, then we'll probably want to go through and see which letter appear the most, right? Return the letter that appeared the most. So let's go ahead and start it. It will be very similar to the way we started the last one. So our first pseudocode says we'll split the string into letters. Really simple, right? So we take the string and we split it into letters. We already finished that. That one right here is done. And then it says count in each individual letter. In order to do that, we need to loop through it to count the letters, right? Because we don't have access to those individual letters unless we're looping through it and accessing them through the loop. And we can use a for each loop here. You can split it into a string and assign that to a variable, and then use for let I equals 0, I is less than string dot length, blah blah blah. But the for each is just a more elegant way of doing it. And the for each, of course, is going to take in a function, a character function. We'll just use a arrow function. I think this will be a lot simpler without the arrow function. But let's just say, so this is going to take in the arrow function right here. It's going to take in a character. And what do we want to do with those individual characters? This is where we need to start thinking about this more, right? So let's go ahead. So it takes in a character. Don't forget your arrow function. It takes in the character. Now what do we want to do? Now that we're accessing each of those characters, like for example in IV, we're accessing IV, Y, Y, Y. What do we want to do with those characters? Let's just check if the characters exist. So my way of thinking about this is, let's not only find the mass character, let's return how many times each character appear in the string, right? Because if we know how many times each character appear, then we can just return the one that's the most. And this way we can even return the one that's the least or the second most or things like that. We can do a lot more than just what the problem is asking. And if we want to do it this way, then we'll most likely need to store that in some sort of object. So let's just go up here and store it in the object. We can do const letter object. This is terrible naming, by the way. You can call this whatever you want to call it, but we can do const letter object and initiate that with just an empty object there. And now that we're actually looping through the string, let's just go ahead and check if we do have that string that we're looking through. So if letter object, and since we're using char right here, that's what we're calling each of these. If letter object char, then what do we want to do? Let's just increase it, right? Because if we go through, we find one of it, there will be 1. If we find another one, then it will be 2. If we find another one, it will be 3, right? So let's just go ahead and increase it. So if we find a letter and then we find it again, we'll increase it. But if we don't find that letter, then what do we want to do? If we don't find it, we can just go ahead and set it equals to 1, because each letter is going to appear at least once. Each letter in the loop is appearing at least once. So what is this doing right here? We have an object and we're going through this. If we're saying if the letter appears, store it into the object. If we see it again, add 1 to it. If we see it again, add 1 to it. This is our way of keeping track of the letters in the object and how many times they appeared. Also, if you don't have it, just set it to 1, because we have each letter is going to appear at least 1. And actually, we can come down here and just return the letter object so we can actually see what I'm talking about. Mass character digest. Return. Okay, I'm not actually. Let's do let result equals console. No, let result equals mass character. And we can do it with Ivy, right? And then we can just console log result. And then we can run this again and let's see what we get now. So here, let me make this wider. As you can see now we're actually getting how many times each letter appear. In Ivy, I appears once, V appears once, but Y appears 3 times, right? If we add another V, then V should appear twice now. And this way, we're not only finding the max letter, but we're finding how many times each of those letters appear. And what we want to return from this is Y, because that's the maximum character. This doesn't solve the problem. It just shows us how we can solve the problem. So now that we have this, how do we actually solve the problem? How do we return Y? We know that Y is the greatest one because we see it in the object here, but we want to return that because that's what the problem is looking for. And if you remember from the last challenge that we solved, I said anytime we're dealing with counting something, we will need to initiate some type of variable somewhere to basically track it with, to compare it with something along that line. So here, let's just initiate that variable up here. Max number equals 0, and that's what we'll use. So while we're going through it, we'll be comparing how many times each of these appear to the max number, right? Because we're trying to return the letter that appeared the most. And let's actually write it out and it will make more sense. So now that we have this object here of the letters and how many times it appears, we want to go through the object and just return the maximum number. The Y, we want to return Y because that's the one that has the maximum number. So let's go here and let's try to do it. You can use a lot of loops for this, but one of the loops that I love using, especially with objects and things like this, is just the for in loop. The difference between for in and for of, quick difference. For of, we actually loop through the actual items in the object. For in loops through the index of the items in the object. I always remember it because for in, for index, so just think about it like that. So we want to go through the index of each of those items, so we can just do that here. For let, again, we use the variable char up there, we can use it here, right, in letter object. So for let I in letter object, for let V in letter object, for let Y in letter object, for let those in. Now we want to actually do something with those, right? So let's go ahead and we want to compare whatever we're seeing here to max number that we initiated up there. So we can just use an if statement for this. So we can say if letter object char, we're trying to compare it to this right here. So we can say if this is actually just greater than the max number that we initiated up there, what do we want to do to it? I'll say, okay, so let's actually think about this. If the letter object, if, for example, 1 that we see here, if 2 that we see here, if 3 that we see here, if any of these is bigger than this, then what do you think we want to do with this? then this will be the biggest one, right? Because max number right now is just 0, because that's what we're starting with. But 0 is not the actual maximum number. It's just something that we have there to compare other max numbers to. So if the max number changes to 1, then we want the max number to be 1. If it changes to 2, we want it to replace it, and 2 will be the new max number. If it changes to 3, and so on. So if something like that happen, we can just say max number, then in that case equals letter object char. I hope that makes sense. If whatever we're looping through, if we're on 1, which is bigger than 0, then we want the new max number right here to become 1. And then the loop moves on to the next item in the object, right? If we're on V and V appears twice, which is bigger than 1 that we have now, then we want the new max number to be 2. And if we're on Y and then Y, which is bigger than the max number that we have, which is 2, then this changes to 3, right? And this, it doesn't have to go, in order like that. If, for example, I was the greatest number, then I will be, 5 or 6 or whatever it is here. And if we move on to the rest and those are not bigger, it doesn't change anything. So there we go. And that max number, so whatever the max number is, that's what's going to replace here. So currently the max number that appear is Y. So currently, instead of having Y here, we actually have 3 here. And if we return max number right now, it will give us 3, because 3 will replace the max number of 0 that we have up here. Let me make sure I change this back. But we don't want to actually get the number, we want to get the letter that has that max number, which is pretty simple. Once we have this, we just need to initiate another thing here that we can compare it to. Like I said, anytime you want to be doing something like this that's counting or things like that, you will want to initiate something to compare it to change it to once you actually find it. So let's just say, let max character, did I use that already? It suggested it. Let max character equals, that's the name of the, so terrible naming, but let's just do it like that. Let's max character equals an empty string, because it is nothing yet. But once we get the max number, then maybe we want to change max character equals char. I hope that makes sense. Max number is the number for the character, and then max character is being changed to the character for that number. So if we were looping through it and we're on Y, and we're on this 3 right here, which is the biggest max number, we want to assign max character that we have up here to whatever 3 is for right here, which is Y. And basically the problem is finished here, right? Then we just want to return our max character, basically. And if we run this right now and all goes well, it should return Y. So let's try Y. It return Y because Y is the biggest number, right? And let's make the biggest number V. It will return V. Let's go ahead and change it to JavaScript. It should return A because we have 2 A's in there and everything else is just 1. It returns A, right? And even in JavaScript, we can still return the object, and we can see what the object looks like. So we can return letter object. I think this is a great way to take a look at this. And again, we get each of the letters and how many times they appear. And this is a great way to solve this problem. You see everything, and yes, I hope this helps someone. So take it upon yourself and try to return the least number that appear, or if not that, if we have more than 2 max numbers, for example, if we had another I in here, so now we have both A that appeared twice and I that appeared twice, try to push those into an array and return it. If there's more than one, return an array. If there's just one, return just that one. I think that would be great practice for you. But yes, I hope this can help someone out there.